Ahoy mateys, and welcome to Real Obscure. My name is Kevin H. Shaw, and in tonight's show, a small town's horrible history comes back to haunt it, as fog-clad phantoms descend upon the celebrating citizens to exact a terrible revenge. From 1980, it's the ghoulish ghost story, John Carpenter's The Fog. John Carpenter is a writer, director, producer and musician with one of the most impressive resumes in genre movie making. As a child he was fascinated with cinema and began making his own short movies. After studying at the USC School of Cinematic Arts, he released his directorial debut, Dark Star, in 1974. The movie saw Carpenter collaborating with fellow movie maker Dan O'Bannon, who would later find fame as the scriptwriter on 1979's Alien and directing the punk rock zombie classic The Return of the Living Dead, which was almost this week's movie of choice, so zombie fans stick around and keep an eye on future episodes. He followed this debut up with an incredible run of now classic movies, including Assault on Precinct 13, the seminal seasonal slasher Halloween, Escape from New York, The Thing, Big Trouble in Little China. Well, I could go on, but trust me when I say that there are very few directors with a resume as impressive as Carpenter's. And his cinematic DNA continues to be seen in the works of those who have followed him, with James Cameron, Guillermo del Toro, James Gunn, Neil Marshall and Danny Boyle all crediting him with being an influence on their approach to cinema. He also worked as a composer, initially due to budgetary restrictions on his earlier movies, but scored some of the most famous movie soundtracks ever, including the classic Halloween theme. Carpenter has since mostly retired from movie making and is now a full-time rock star, having released 2 albums featuring re-recordings of his classic movie themes and 4 Lost Themes albums featuring soundtracks for unmade movies. The Fog was written by Carpenter and his longtime producer Deborah Hill. Hill, who sadly passed away in 2005, was an absolute production powerhouse, working with Carpenter on this movie, plus Halloween and its first sequel, and Escape from New York. She also co-wrote Halloween and Halloween 2. She was responsible for writing Laurie's scenes, and it's her work that makes Laurie such an iconic final girl, and also produced the much maligned Halloween 3. She later produced The Dead Zone, Clue, Adventures in Babysitting, and The Fisher King. Like Carpenter, her influence cannot be understated. James Cameron, Stacey Sher, and Gail Ann Hurd have all credited Hill as helping them establish their movie-making careers. So, what's it all about? Well, the movie opens in fine fashion, with old sea dog Mr. Macon recounting a ghostly tale to an assembly of children sitting around a campfire on the eve of Antonio Bay's centennial celebrations. As the clock approaches midnight, he regales them with one last tale, To Keep Us Warm, in which he recounts the tragic events of the Elizabeth Dane, a clipper seeking refuge from a mysterious fog whose crew mistook a campfire for a lighthouse and were wrecked upon the rocks. Macon, a nod to the classic author of ghost stories Arthur Macon, is played by John Houseman. Probably best known for his role as a producer and his work with Orson Welles, Houseman also has a number of acting credits to his name, including most famously The Paper Chase, plus performances in Rollerball, 3 Days of the Condor, and Ghost Story. Now this story is wonderfully told, with Macon adding so many tiny details, how the campfire was like the one they're sitting around, how the dead men's lungs filled with salt water, their eyes open in the darkness, and how when the fog returns, these dead men will rise up and search for that campfire and those responsible. And as Mr. Macon finishes his story, the church bell tolls midnight. This introduction was added when the original cut of the movie fell short of a full theatrical runtime, But as is often the way, what started as a simple practical fix ends up being a highlight of the movie. Houseman's delivery is fantastic and is wonderfully hypnotic, his pacing and tone almost monotonous, and yet it not only holds our attention but also draws us in. In less skilled hands this would have ended with a jump scare, but no, Carpenter plays it smart, and instead Mr. Macon simply finishes his tale, leaving the listener instead with the notion of the Elizabeth Dane's crew and their prophesied return. The simple piano theme, penned by Carpenter, and this is personally one of my favourite scores of his, plays as the camera pans away to reveal the tide rolling into the bay and then an establishing shot of the local church. It's here we're introduced to Father Malone, who is played by Hal Holbrook. Holbrook is one of those actors you'll recognise from his many TV appearances, but it's his one-man play, Mark Twain Tonight, for which he's best known, winning an Emmy for the television broadcast of the show on CBS in 1967. He's probably best known to movie fans for his appearance in the Dirty Harry movie Magnum Force, in which he played Lieutenant Briggs. Horror fans will also recognise him from his appearance in the first Creepshow movie in the Crate segment. Anyway, Malone sits in the study of his church drinking. Although it's never explicitly explained and really doesn't need to be, we get the sense that Father Malone is a troubled soul. He seems to have lost his faith and is haunted by, well, something. After a brief cameo by an uncredited, very young and very hip-looking John Carpenter, Malone is shocked when, at the stroke of midnight, a brick falls from the wall of his study, revealing a bricked-up, battered journal. As Malone flicks through the book, he comes across an ominous entry. April 30th. Midnight till 1 belongs to the dead. Good Lord deliver us. We then cut to a montage of Antonio Bay at night, a series of quiet, deserted wide shots that's very reminiscent of the similar nighttime scenes featured in Messiah of Evil, which we covered in episode 5. Frequent Carpenter collaborator Dean Cundy served as the movie's cinematographer, and as ever, his work is outstanding. Cundy is a master of using empty space to create a sense of menace, and his work elevates the movie above its meagre budget. It seems Midnight till 1 does indeed belong to the dead, as we witness all manner of strangeness. A row of payphones begin to ring simultaneously. A clerk in a grocery store is spooked by strange rattlings and bangings. The lights burst into life at a local gas station, and one of the pumps begins dispensing gasoline of its own volition, while parked cars begin honking, their lights on full as their alarms are triggered. But soon the residents of Antonio Bay will have more to worry about than malfunctioning machines and flickering lights. For, as Mr. Macon warned us, the dead men from the Elizabeth Dane and the fog that led to their demise have returned to exact their revenge upon the people of Antonio Bay. Now we'll discuss a little more of the movie's plot later, but for now, let's take a quick roll call of the cast. Local DJ Stevie Wayne is played by Adrienne Barbeau, who at the time was married to John Carpenter. The Fog was her first major movie role after numerous appearances in TV in the 70s, and she went on to appear in Escape from New York, The Cannonball Run, Swamp Thing, and she also voiced the Silk Spectre in the recent animated Watchmen adaptation. She also performed the role of Catwoman in Batman the Animated Series, and appeared in the HBO cancelled far too soon weirdness that was Carnival. Her character Stevie spends most of the movie broadcasting her show from an isolated lighthouse, and interestingly only shares scenes with one other resident of the town, her son Andy, played by Ty Mitchell. Tom Atkins plays Nick Castle, which is a nod to the actor Nick Castle, who played The Shape, i.e. Michael Myers, in the original Halloween, and also directed the space epic The Last Starfighter, which is also on my list of movies to cover sometime. Like Barbo, Atkins' big break came filming The Fog, and he worked on numerous other projects with Carpenter, including playing the lead role in Halloween 3, which yet again is another one for the real obscure list, and his other credits include Night of the Comet, Lethal Weapon, Maniac Cop, and Drive Angry. Jamie Lee Curtis plays Elizabeth, or Beth as Nick calls her, a hitchhiker he picks up, literally, nudge nudge wink wink say no more, as he's driving home at night. I'm going to assume you're familiar with Jamie Lee Curtis, as she's appeared in pretty much everything, from the Halloween series and James Cameron's True Lies, to a fantastic turn in Everything Everywhere All at Once, and commercials for yogurts that make you poo. The movie also features two actors with a link to Curtis: Nancy Loomis, who appeared with her in Halloween, and Janet Leigh, who is, well, her mother. Loomis was another Carpenter stalwart, appearing in his previous movie, Assault on Precinct 13, plus a brief cameo in Halloween 2, and a small role in Halloween 3, playing the wife of Tom Atkins. Here she plays Sandy, personal assistant to the Centennial Celebrations planner Kathy Williams, played by Janet Leigh. Janet Leigh appeared in a number of movies, including The Manchurian Candidate and the Killer Rabbit movie Night of the Lepus, but is probably best known for her appearance in Hitchcock's Psycho, playing the role of Marion Crane. The whole look of the film, and particularly the Phantom crew, was inspired by a trip to Stonehenge during a promotional tour for Assault on Precinct 13. Carpenter and Barbo saw a fog swathing the stones and began to wonder what could be within the strange mist. Carpenter has also cited the 1958 adaptation of the British TV show The Trollenberg Terror, with its mysterious cloud-fogged creatures, as also being an influence. Whatever the origin, it's an absolutely iconic look, and the crew look amazing. Now, the first to encounter these undead sailors are the crew of the Seagrass, a fishing boat whose crew are out at sea fishing, i.e. getting drunk, but before they can return home, an ancient clipper emerges from the mists that have suddenly formed around them. A clipper manned by a group of fog-shrouded figures, who proceed to slaughter the crew. Now, the first cut of the movie actually didn't feature the ghostly sailors, and instead we saw supernatural forces dispatching the crew. However, Carpenter felt this was too nebulous a concept, and that the movie lacked any kind of identifiable threat. I can see how that could be the case, and I'm reminded of the way in which the demon was added to Night of the Demon to make it clear that there was indeed a physical threat present. Indeed, I'm sure Carpenter was probably influenced by this classic, as the way the fog moves in many of the scenes is very reminiscent of the similar fogs that accompany the arrival of the demon. Anyway, Carpenter went back and filmed additional scenes, featuring the phantoms and also scenes of the Seagrass crew meeting their end. Scanners had just been released, and its over-the-top scenes of exploding heads had seen the movie generating quite a buzz. A story of unseen spectral forces was the polar opposite of Cronenberg's gory sci-fi horror, and so Carpenter felt the fog needed to deliver some similar shocking moments. As a result, we see the fishermen being impaled and stabbed by the ghosts, just to give it a more visceral and physical feel. Now, the thing about these scenes is that although they were added to include gore, they're relatively restrained. There's no gouts of blood or limbs being hacked off as people stagger around screaming. And they're actually all the more effective for it. You can't take a psionically induced exploding head seriously. It's comedic in its over-the-top realisation, and is as likely to draw a chuckle as it is a gasp. But a boat hook to the chest or a spike to the face? Ew. And just on a side note, the sound design on these scenes is fantastically squishy and really sells the nastiness of these deaths. And so, with the crew missing, Nick and Beth investigate. and over the course of the day we have a series of unusual events unfolding, including one of the seagrass crew returning from death to deliver a message from beyond, a mysterious coin that transforms into a piece of the Elizabeth Dane, and a series of revelations from the journal Father Malone discovered, culminating in a second witching hour, in which the crew of the wrecked clipper return once more. Now, The Fog is a masterpiece of restraint and slow burn storytelling. It takes time to build atmosphere, and there's a real sense of foreboding as the centennial midnight celebrations approach. The movie delivers scene after scene of unrelenting menace. But for all this, Carpenter also manages to weave in some genuinely funny moments, light to contrast and emphasise the dark, in the way good horror movies often do. There's a scene, for example, where the Seagrass crew are drunk and lounging around in the cabin. They're discussing Stevie as they listen to her show, and she gives a warning that there's a fog bank approaching them. Tommy, played by veteran actor Buck Flowers, stares from a porthole, mumbling about how there's no fog bank out there, as the others talk about Stevie. There's no fog bank out there, he reiterates to himself as his crewmates continue their bawdy discussion, before he then sees the fog approaching and comments, "Hey, there's a fog bank out there." And although it's more of an Easter egg, the character of Tommy, like Aitken's Nick Castle, is named after Carpenter's longtime friend, Tommy Wallace, who actually edited this movie. The local weatherman, played by another of Carpenter's repertory players, Charles Cyphers, is named Dan O'Bannon, who we mentioned before. And in the morgue scene, we meet Dr. Phibes, named after the Vincent Price anti-hero. On a side note, he's played by Darwin Joston, Napoleon Wilson in Carpenter's Assault on Precinct 13. Now, those who've seen the movie will also tell you it features a perplexing conversation between Stevie and her son. At one point he asks if he can have a Coke, accompanied by something called a stomach pounder. Stevie acquiesces on the understanding that it's after lunch. This has led to hundreds of conversations online trying to figure out just what Andy is asking for. Some people mishear the line as stomach powder and assume it's some kind of fun thing like dropping a Mentos into a soda bottle, but the movie's subtitles, and Carpenter himself, establish that it is indeed stomach pounder. Other suggestions include some kind of peanut butter based milkshake or a fast food hamburger, although why he would be allowed this after already eating lunch is something nobody ever actually explains. So what is a stomach pounder? Carpenter eventually revealed that it's actually an exercise. You know, the one where you lie on your back and you raise your feet just a foot or so off the ground and then hold it. We used to do this back in my days of studying Kung Fu, and trust me, it really bloody hurts. Anyway, apparently Carpenter thought it sounded like a great name for a horrible snack, and so used it as the name in the movie. Unlike the crew of the Elizabeth Dane, we can at least lay that one to rest. But for all the side jokes and humorous lines, this is Carpenter's moodiest and most atmospheric film. Yes, there's a fantastic sense of isolation and paranoia in The Thing, and Halloween captures that autumnal atmosphere perfectly, but this is something else. It's a tale of slow menace, of malice that's brewed for a century, and a true exploration of the fear of the unknown. And for a movie set in April, it's surprisingly bleak and blustery. This isn't the shiny, sunny California you'd expect. If you enjoy a good ghost story, then this is an absolute must-see. Carpenter shows restraint, allowing the unease to build, and even when there are moments of violence, they're presented in a surprisingly down-to-earth way. It's a slow burn, but never boring, tale of a town coming to terms with its past. So if you're looking for a spooky tale for a dark night, then this is sure to give you a most pleasing terror. And now it's time to discuss the movie's finer plot points in The Spoiler Zone. As you probably gathered, Father Malone discovers that his grandfather and 5 other townsfolk were responsible for the deliberate scuttling of the Elizabeth Dane, which was carrying a wealthy man named Blake, played by the movie and makeup FX Meister Rob Bowden, who, afflicted by leprosy, had made an agreement with the locals to establish a leper colony to the north. Balking at the idea of having such a colony mere miles from them, the 6 enacted their plan to wreck the clipper carrying the afflicted, and then used Blake's wealth to establish the town of Antonio Bay. Now apparently this is actually based on a real event, which Carpenter recounts on the DVD commentary, stating that in the 18th century, a ship called the Frolic was similarly scuttled by locals in California using this same technique. Anyway, on the eve of the town's centennial, Blake and his crew return, seeking to take the lives of the 6 conspirators, or indeed any other 6 lives from Antonio Bay. And so the crew stalk the residents of the town, culminating in Nick, Beth, Sandy, Mrs. Williams and Stevie's son Andy, along with Father Malone, taking refuge in the church as the undead crew surround them. Meanwhile, Stevie, alone in her lighthouse, also comes under attack, with the dead crew stalking her and eventually pursuing her onto the roof of the lighthouse. During the attack, Malone discovers that the last of Blake's treasure has been melted down into a gold crucifix, and freeing it from its hiding place within the church walls, attempts to bargain with the revenant of Blake, offering the gold and his life in return for the safety of the town. Blake takes the gold, but before he can claim the priest, Nick rescues him. In a flash of light, the crew vanish, leaving the shocked and frightened survivors to figure out just what happened. Stevie returns to the air and broadcasts a warning that it could happen again, and to watch the fog. A little nod to the Watch the Skies coda from The Thing from Another World, which of course Carpenter later remade as The Thing. Malone, now alone in the church, ponders why Blake didn't take his life, and as he does so, we see a glowing fog flowing under the church door. He turns to see the crew of the Elizabeth Dane watching him, and we see Blake standing behind him. As he turns, Blake swings a sword at him, and the movie ends. Apparently Carpenter did plan to produce an anthology series based around the fog, similar to the idea he originally had for Halloween, which I would imagine would be some sort of nautical ghost story series. At one point Nick tells a story about a vanishing coin, and there's also the weirdness of the coin Andy finds that transforms into a piece of the wrecked clipper. There's a huge wealth of sea-bound lore being hinted at that could have been explored in this series, but sadly it never came to pass. However, what we are left with is one of Carpenter's most atmospheric and ethereal tales, a ghost story that masterfully evokes the spirit of the great masters of the craft, in a fantastically creepy, Jamesian tale of haunted histories and visceral, vengeance-driven nightmares that's best watched on a dark, cold night as midnight approaches. Now, Mr. Macon may promise that such a tale would keep us warm, but if you ask me, you're more likely to be left with chills. Anyway, thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode of Real Obscure. This episode of Real Obscure was written, recorded, edited and cursed for 100 years by me, Kevin H. Shaw. If you enjoyed it, then please be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe and review on your favourite podcasting platform, if applicable. You can learn more about Real Obscure by visiting realobscurepod.com, and you can get in touch with your feedback by emailing hellorealobscure@gmail.com. We're also on BlueSky, and I'd love to see you there. The Fog is copyright 1980. All content here is used for... The Fog is copyright 1980. All content here is used for educational and commentary purposes under Section 107 of the Copyright Act Fair Use, and remains the property of the respective copyright holders. Presented here for the purposes of critique, commentary and discussion. No copyright infringement is intended. So please, Don't shipwreck me and send me to the depths to stare into the darkness for all eternity.